approach to managing results at the constituency level inspired by Nigeria has improved the efficiency of the electoral process. So tonight we take another look at Ghanaian presidential election, and this time the lessons for Nigeria. Joining me from Accra, Ghana is Paul Ejime, a journalist and global affairs analyst. Good evening to you, Mr. Ejime. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and good evening, viewers.
Good evening to you. So the just concluded presidential and parliamentary election is the 9th such election since Ghana transitioned to democratic rule in January 1993. And political analysts and election observers like yourself have said a lot about this election. And realistically, so many factors contributed to the process and outcome of this election. What were these factors for you? And as an observer, what is your overall assessment of the process and outcome of the election?
So there is really no election that is that free. I think experts are talking about being fair and then, credible and transparent, and then also compliance, complying substantially with the rules governing the game. But in Ghana, and Ghana is showing example, like you said, they are, since 1992, when multi-party democracy got there, they have done it now for nine times, circle, voting, conducting the elections, and relatively peaceful transfer of power, in those years, with the two dominant parties, the NDC and NPP, sharing political power. So 3 times, one has, lost to the other, and then so on and so forth. For instance, the former vice president, who is now president-elect, defeated the outgoing president, Nana Akufo-Addo, in 2012, and then lost 2 consecutive elections to him. And now he has defeated Akufo-Addo's vice president. So it is there. They have shown, Ghanaians will boast that they have a track record, and that, of course, in 2020, there were some 8 killings. Even in this one, with all the, relative calm and peace, I think 1 or 2 or 3 deaths have also been reported. And even as they are also collating the results for the parliamentary election, there are, frictions here and there. But on the whole, it has passed on peacefully because the loser decided, even before the elections were tallied or the results were announced, picked up the phone and congratulated his opponent. That is Mahamudu Bawumia. He congratulated former President John Mahama, the now president-elect. And that really brought, tension down, that there is nothing anybody can do. So a lot depends on the attitude, disposition of individual and political actors to allow institutions to work. And then you build a culture. Democracy is not, it has a lot of other factors, not just the election. And it is a process, not an event. I think that is what other countries can learn, and then grow the culture and make sure that it's unfortunate that perhaps politicians, and particularly in Africa, they know how to lose, how to win, but they have never managed their losses, because they want to win every election, and it's not possible. Somebody has to win, and then there is another election upcoming. But politicians don't believe in that. That is where we have the problem.
Mr. Ejime, we've also heard of how striking this particular election is, going by the fact that even supporters of the NPP welcomed their party's defeat. I mean, this is rare in Nigeria. But how much of a big blow is this to the ruling party? First, when you consider that former President Mahama ascended to the presidency in 2012 after President Jonathan Mills died, his tenure until 2012 was marked by turbulence. Like I said in my introduction, drastic power cuts, allegations of corruption and fraud. And when he lost the second bid for the presidency to Akufo-Addo in 2016, he became the first incumbent to miss out on a second term. In 2020, he lost again. Now he has won this time. Is this a case of Ghanaians giving him a fresh start? And I would also like to say this is also rare in Nigeria.
Well, you can read it, the way one chooses. But what is there is that you build, you entrench, you strengthen all the fabrics of democracy. And it is not just one thing. It is not just the electoral umpire. It is not. It includes the security agencies, political parties. It includes the judiciary. It includes the legislature. Everybody has to come to the table and do their part and not cross, stay in your lane, as Nigerians will say. But what happens is that when you have the executive trying to dominate the legislature and then the judiciary, or what you call state capture, that is where the problem lies. I think everybody should, if everybody maintain the separation of power and then work with it the way it is written in the Constitution, I think democracy will have a fresh breath, unlike what is happening in some other countries in West Africa. So Ghanaians, by the way, it was, remember that it was the military that also wrote their own constitution, like in Nigeria. In 1992, J.J. Rawlings, when he was handing over, he transmitted from military dictatorship to civilian government. And then the constitution is there, the Ghanaians are following it, and when there are issues, they go to court to settle it. And court is not, again, we have to say that this allegation of low trust in public institutions is also here in Ghana. But what is happening is that they have now chosen to, the positives that one draws is more than the negative. They are emphasizing on the positive. And you said that ruling party members were not in support. That would be well. That could be well be the truth. Going by the sweeping victory.
So, Mr. Ejime, because of time, in broader perspectives, what are the direct lessons for Nigeria?
Well, the lesson is to play by the rule. The lesson is to allow the institutions to work. The lesson, particularly for politicians, is to not allow their personal ambition to get on the way of national interest. Because if Ejime had not, considered, perhaps you will have some supporters on the street. Remember in when was it? When President Jonathan considered, there was drama at the collation center when some people are saying no, they will not agree. But when the man involved now comes to extend the olive branch, you have nothing to do. You have to go home. But so that is what is happening. It behoves on the political party politicians, in their conduct, because that is where the whole institutions are comprised of human beings. For it to work, everybody has to play their own part. And for it to work, you have to give it a chance. You do not put your own personal ambition above national interest. At the end of the day, it is Ghana that is the winner in all of this, and not Ejime or even President Mahama knows that he has his work cut out, because there is unemployment, particularly among the youth. There is corruption. There is, a lot of things that, and inflation and hardship. And so he has already, the other thing that you learn, he has already put up, named a transition team, which means that he wants to hit the road, running, the ground running, because he has to take over on the 7th of January next year.
Absolutely, because it was interesting for many that Bawumia conceded, because days ahead of that election, there were reports of hawkish utterances on the campaign trail by influential NPP leaders, including the sitting president himself. Also, the belief by each of the two parties that they must win the election or else heightened mutual antagonism and tensions going into that election. Perhaps, many say perhaps this is this do or die approach to election is an African thing. But I'm also interested in the kind of security measures in place to ensure a safe and peaceful electoral process. I mean, the Ado election that we had some months ago, we had over 22,000 security agencies deployed for that election. What was it like in Ghana?
Well, let's begin by this, putting the factors in context, the numbers. Ghana is about 34 million. Nigeria is 220 or 230. But we shouldn't hide under the population and then decide to do the wrong thing. So what has happened is that it's not no rocket science. There were policemen in the 40,000 or so polling stations across the 16 regions and then 216 districts. So things were, I will tell you that there were incidences. In fact, there were shootings and then about 3 or 2 reported killings. But generally, things passed off peacefully. And, there wasn't that do or die kind of thing. And you will say that the fact that Bayuma going to concede very early in the day was part of a way of dampening the tension. So security was there, but it is not as loud as you have in Nigeria, where you say no movement and all that. At times it appeared as if it was a normal day, in Ghana. So this idea of people being uptight as if you are going to war, or when actually elections are supposed to be very seamless process, without making it look as if you are going to war. And it is that perception that that usually brings divisions and then violence, which was not. It was here, but not at the number that could affect the numbers or the process. All the international observers, including ECOWAS, they are all saying, well, it was peaceful, and then to a very large extent, bar the 1 or 2 incidents that it measured up to international standard.
Independent candidacy also stood out for many in this election. We saw about 6 independent candidates, which was a huge dynamic as well. But it does not look like Africa has embraced that culture. Nigeria is not yet there. We're still struggling with that. But interestingly, it was in October the House of Reps passed for a second reading, a bill seeking to alter the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to provide for independent candidacy. I'd like for you to speak to the importance of expanding political participation through independent candidacy.
Well, that is one area that, perhaps the drafters of the Constitution or those talking about an amendment to look at. But it has not really altered so much, because at the end of the day, they had about 29 or how many political parties. Only how many? You had 12 candidates. Only 4 were independents. The others belong to political parties, and so on and so forth. But it always ends up in 2 dominants. If you look at America, you look at UK, it's always the tendency for people to coalesce. It's about number. And the problem is that elections have become too expensive. The money influence. Individuals cannot muster the money to be able to run an election. For instance, the independents here and the other parties, they were getting, less than 0.00 point, they also ran. That's what you call them. Otherwise, it was a two-horse race. Has always been since 1992. In some other countries, yes, they have. You won't believe that in America or UK, they have other political parties, but two continue to dominate. So what one should concentrate really is about allowing the culture to grow. It is not a 1 minute affair. You have to cultivate it and allow it through the, like I said, let me repeat, the disposition and then attitude. There has to be this orientation or reorientation to know that, agree that election is not a do or die.
But are you optimistic about seeing the National Assembly unite in support of this bill?
Oh, you mean in Ghana?
In Nigeria.
In Nigeria?
Yes.
Oh, well, don't let us begin to compare apples with oranges. Nigeria is a different kettle of fish. If you look at the context and then, the coloration of what is happening at the assembly there, you wouldn't think that they will have the what is it called, the muscle to be able to, and that is the criticism. Some people think that it's a case of the executive telling them how to jump, and they will say how high. So they have not mustered them. Right. That is, let's go back to Ghana. Ghana now has a hung parliament. That is, the two parties have an equal number of MPs, and that was why the speaker came from the opposition. All right. That is one. If the ruling party can be put on its toes and not have a situation where once this executive says, they call it hallelujah parliament or yes assembly. That shouldn't be the case.
All right. Mr. Ejime, because of our time, we're wrapping up in a minute. In 1 minute, I want us to talk about early voting, which was another element that shaped the process of that election. Yaga Africa here in Nigeria has called for Electoral Act amendments to enable early voting by essential service providers such as election officials, security personnel, accredited observers, and media reporters to cast their vote before election day. At the moment, we do not know the status of that bill, but how crucial is it?
Can you repeat your question, please? There was a distraction.
I wanted us to talk about early voting, which was another element that shaped the process of that election. Here in Nigeria, Yaga Africa has called for an electoral amendment to enable early voting. At the moment, we do not know the status of that bill, but how crucial is it? In 1 minute.
Oh, okay. What happened in the case of Ghana was that they call it special voting, and that is for those who are on essential duties, the soldiers, electoral officials, and all that, and so on and so forth. But it's not really a case of whether you have early voting or not early voting, because what happens to the early voters could also affect those who vote later in the electoral cycle. So there is a lot that to be done to deconstruct the electoral system in Nigeria, to make sure that for instance, the INEC is carrying a lot of baggage, a lot of burden. It should be unbundled and make sure that it is restricted to those things that it can do. For instance, Ghana has what we call the National Civic Education Commission, and then some of the things that the Electoral Commission cannot do.
All right.
You segregate it and give it to other people, to other agencies to handle, and then so that they will be free. In some places, electoral umpires do not even in America. They don't. All right.
Sadly, we're out of time, Mr. Ejime.
Yes.
I do apologize. Yes. Sadly, we're out of time, but I'm sure we'll continue this conversation some other time as we continue to navigate our way towards achieving electoral integrity. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Paul Ejime is a journalist and global affairs analyst. Thank you so much for your time on Politics Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and as Olajumoke WO using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.